Alright, what's going on, dudes, and welcome to SkyBlock Survival.
DanTDM over here. I'd love to, you know what? Travis, this could be the start of something awesome.
Hi, I'm ThaMango, and today is probably going to be my favourite video I've ever made, because today we're going to be transforming some of the most nostalgic Minecraft builds. Over the years, new blocks keep getting added every update, and so I want to go back today and make some huge edits to some of my favourite builds from my childhood, including DanTDM's lab, which a bunch of people keep asking me to transform. If you're new around here, I transform a load of builds, including the vanilla structures, but also a ton of Hermitcraft builds, like the entirety of Bottom. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy this kind of thing, as I'll be doing a lot more transformations in the future. Anyway, let's begin. I thought that the best build to begin with would be the Temple of Notch. This is probably the most iconic Minecraft build that's ever been created, and was made all the way back in 2011 by FV Disco, who built some of the best redstone contraptions back in the day. If you're not already aware, the way this build works is you throw a gold ingot into the well to enter the temple, and once you're inside, the giant Notch statue will either wink at you and give you a lot of diamonds and emeralds, or he'll cry and you'll fall all the way into some lava below, which isn't very fun. Now, for the transformation, the first thing I decided to do was clear out all of the trees. I want to do a lot of terraforming and add in some new jungle trees right at the end of this transformation, so they all need to go for now. I then tidied up some of the terrain around the entrance area and flattened it out. I want to begin by working with the entrance, and then we'll move to the statue area later. Seeing as the build is meant to be the Temple of Notch, I then thought it'd be fun to actually make it into more of a temple, rather than a hole in the terrain that you enter. And so I began by just building up an ancient temple kind of structure in the center. I want it to look like a lost ruin, incorporating a lot of gold into the design, which would have been collected over the years from people paying to enter. On top of the entrance, I built a tree. I know it kinda looks like a big piece of broccoli, but I'm not the best with making trees. Sorry. I added lots of vines and mushrooms to make it look older, but this will just help to block the view of the statue behind, even if you're far away. On the tree, I then thought it would be cool to add plenty of golden apples, like it's growing them, seeing as back in the day these were known by the community as notch apples, and so I thought they'd fit in well with the theme. I then wanted to bulk out the temple a bit more as it looked very thin and out of place, and so I created some huge fire towers on either side of it, which also helped to light up the area at night, seeing as I used frog lights in the center of the flames. And then, fixing up the terrain which I previously made flat, I wanted to make it blend in better with the build, and so now it has multiple layers of height, which molds around the temple to make it look like it's been there for a very long time. To complement the terrain, I also spammed a ton of rocks all around the place, as well as plenty of leaves and grass. For the flowers, I used dandelions and poppies, as they're the oldest flowers in the game, which I think suits the build well. From here, I added a new pathway which leads up to the temple, which looks a bit more old and worn, before moving my focus to transforming the well. This is the place you throw the golden ingot into before entering the temple, and so it had to look pretty impressive as it's the start of the experience. I even added some flame towers around it which just make it look a lot more threatening, especially with all of the smoke. Now, before I move to the middle area, it's important to note that there's a lot of redstone in this build, which means this is a very difficult build to transform. I can't use any major world edit or change too much, as it could very easily end up destroying redstone, and then the build wouldn't function anymore, which would ruin the entire point of it. I'm hoping that once I'm done, everything will still work. The key word being hoping. For the viewing platform, I also bulked it out a bit more, fitting in with the temple. We're now moving to the other side of the build. I attempted to create the terrain with world edit at the start, making some huge boulders around the edge, which I smoothed down a bit. But then I realized it just wasn't going to work, and so I instead manually smoothed all of the terrain. Right now there's a very steep cliff that goes down to the chasm below, and so I wanted the transition to be a lot more smooth. And doing this by hand gave a really cool look, but also meant that this took me an entire day. After all that painful work was done, I added in a bunch more rocks inside and around the hole, and then painted everything with a nice gradient that incorporates more of a mossy, magical look, with cobblestone, emerald ores, and tuff. To finish the area, I then added back in some waterfalls on either side of the chasm, but I gave them a much more realistic look, which just helps to add more character to the entire area. Keep in mind, there will be trees here too once we're finished, which will also just help the area come together, along with these lily pads that I quickly added in. And now for the most important part of the build, the statue. I sent this to my friend Clores, who is an insanely good builder, and they sent me back this really cool updated version. I'm not great with organics or textures, so there's no way I could have made something this cool. They did a really good job. To help it fit in with the area, I added a couple of rocks around it, and then built some magical runes into the terrain which glow at nighttime and make the statue feel more mystical. For the final touch, I had to sort the trees out. I just made a variety of jungle trees in different sizes, and these are really going to help the build come together. I pasted them in all over the place to make quite a dense jungle, and then finished the build with some vines hanging across a couple of the trees. I even added some drip leaves hanging down from these, which helps to create even more ambience. But with that, the first transformation of this video was finished, and I'm so happy with it. Now I just need to check that it actually works. Before we get to the DanTDM Lab transformation, there's one last really iconic build that I want to quickly transform, which will only take a minute or two. And this is SkyBlock. This island made history, being one of the most downloaded maps of all time. I always avoided SkyBlock though, as I always failed to make the first cobblestone generator and then gave up every single time. But building the transformation should be a lot more fun. The first thing I started with was of course the main SkyBlock island. I wanted to get away from the very blocky look of the default one, and instead turn it into more of a cone-shaped island, which looks like it's just been torn out of the ground. To fit the new island, I then destroyed the default tree and built a new oak tree in its place, which just looks a lot more realistic. I avoided mixing other blocks in with the tree though, as I want to keep this survival friendly. From here, I added in a campfire which I think suits the theme well, and makes the island look funner to live on. There's not really much room to work with on the island, and so I created a few extra areas to explore, including barrels filled with loot for players to find. There's even this small cave on the side of the island, with the remains of a player who wasn't able to skyblock very well. Also, really quickly, if this video reaches 2,500 likes, I'll be dropping the download for this SkyBlock world for free in my Discord. So please leave a like, even if you don't want to download it anyway. I'll leave a link to join in a pinned comment. Anyway, moving on, I created a whole bunch of new islands all around the center for players to expand out to and explore. Each of these islands has a unique theme and new blocks to obtain. There's the Ice Island with more water and lots of diamonds to mine in the stone. The Birch Island, which includes bees, way too many bees. The Ancient Island with a small jungle tree and a temple, which contains a fresh set of diamond armor for you to loot. And then of course, I also turned some dimensions into islands, with a Nether Island filled to the brim with lava, glowstone, crimson wood and blazes, and also an End Island. There are also loads of other islands for you to explore for yourself too. But with that, I'd confidently say that the original SkyBlock Island has been transformed. I really hope we reach the like goal, as I'd love for you to explore this for yourself. I've added even more islands since I recorded this. And finally, the last transformation of this video is going to be DanTDM's lab, or more specifically, Dr. Treoris's lab. This is where Dan would do all of his mod showcases absolutely ages ago, and I'm really excited to put my own spin on it. Anyway, let's go. I thought that the best place to begin would be with the main entrance pathway. This L-shaped path takes you into the main lab, and as it's the first part of the build, it's important that I get it right. I want to try and keep the same white colour scheme that Dan went for, but I did mix in some blast furnaces just to add some contrast and a more industrial feel. I also added quite a lot of windows, with a glass roof to let in a lot of light. The lab is a really open build, so I thought this would fit in nicely and pay homage to the build. Moving on, I then began transforming the main lab area. This was really difficult, as I don't want to make the base bigger or change the shape of it, as it's perfect how it is and too much change wouldn't make it feel like the lab anymore. What I did do though is just build the walls upwards, with multiple layers of windows and multiple roofs, to turn it into an enclosed area. On the top layer of the walls, I even added a window that goes all the way around the building, to let in light from every single angle. On top of this central building, I added in a radar dish, just to make the roof look less bland and flat. And it fit in quite nicely, and makes the lab look a lot more labby. To make it feel more in place, I also then added some other roof decorations and lights, as well as some pipes coming down the side of the building. And now going round to the back of the base, we have the testing chamber. This room is where things can, as you guessed, be tested. I kept the shape once again and just built up some more height. I also finished off the roof, doming it in slightly at the top to enclose the room. Now you can do experiments even in the rain. As well as this, I added some yellow and black caution tape around the window, so people know to stay away from it. Now on the side of the lab, there's a small tunnel that goes from Dr. Trayoris' office to a control room in the testing area. I decided instead of just changing the blocks of it, to instead build a temporary room around it, just so it would fit in a bit better and to make the building look less temporary. And then finally, with all the lab exterior done, I added a bunch of rocks and cacti around the build. I was going to build some roads and vehicles, but I felt that would be too out of place, as the lab is meant to be in the middle of nowhere. As much as I'm transforming this, I still want it to feel like the original lab. Once this path was added in, I was finished, and could then move on to the interior. Now, I created the interior for the entrance hall while I was doing the exterior, as there's not much to include inside. But as you can see, I just kept it very simple with some hanging redstone lanterns and a yellow carpet, just like the original had. There's also a bit of room left connecting the hall to the main lab room, and so I just squeezed in a small storage area. And entering the lab is where I actually had more interior to build. This room was a mess because of the way that I had built the exterior, and so I just cleaned up all of the walls and added a small balcony halfway up the room, just to break it up a bit. From here, I also added some textured wooden floors using beehives and stairs. Upstairs on the small balcony area, I just decided to also have it as a storage area. With the amount of mods that Dan reviews, there would be a lot of items to store, so you'll probably notice a lot more barrels around the lab. Moving over now to Dr. Trayoris' office, I didn't want to change too much. I just hid the piston that connects to the museum below and changed up the metal floor to a more comfy wooden floor. I'm using a lot of mangrove wood in this build for the floors, as a lot of the floor used to be red carpets, which is a similar colour. I also added a small chair to the office for any guest to sit in. And now moving to the connecting tunnel, I opened it up a bit more to make more use of the extra space that I'd built, because there's no reason not to. Now it's a lot less claustrophobic to walk up to the control room, and you can fit even more storage. In the control room itself, there wasn't much to edit, so I just added some gizmos to the control desk. For the actual experimenting room though, I didn't change too much. The room is meant to be very open, so there's a ton of room for experiments to take place, so I didn't want to clutter it. What I did do though is add a very worn floor in the center of it, which looks like it's been through a lot of explosions. I also added a small extra control area into the room itself, with a button in the center to emergency stop, in case anything gets out of hand, which it probably will. And finally for the interior, going down below the base is Dan's museum, assuming I can get through the piston. This area is really cool. Unfortunately, I don't have the mods he uses installed, so it looks pretty empty, but this is normally my favourite part of the lab. It's basically where he stores some of the coolest items from the mods that he's reviewed, with a diamond minecart in the centre. I didn't want to change much as it's a very historic area, but I did change some of the walls and the floor to make it fit in more with a lab theme. I also raised the ceiling a bit in the centre so it feels more open. And with that, the lab was finished. This isn't my biggest transformation I've ever done, but I really like it. You can still tell it's the lab, but it looks a lot different. If you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and subscribe if you're new. I'm trying to hit 30,000 subscribers, so I'd appreciate any help a lot. Please do leave a comment if you'd like me to do a part 2. You could even suggest builds to transform next time. I read every single comment, and they also really help the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week with the next video. Goodbye.